Is that a jammy dodge you got there then, Sid?
I've got a jammy dodger, boss, and I've got a fancy new thing. Which is like, you remember the pink wafer biscuits?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the bottom of that, but a posh grown-up version with a thick slab of chocolate on top.
Ooh, it's monogrammed.
Oh,
look
yeah,
at
look at that bad
It's got
boy.
a monogram on it.
It's a proper biscuit.
Does it go with your hankies?
No, but it goes with my jammy dodger.
Nice.
Right, yeah.
With your double coffee as well.
Me
Jeez,
double
you're
coffee
gonna,
as well.
You're going to be able to smell colour soon.
He's got the rocket fuel, which is the coffee. Well, no, the sugar's the rocket fuel.
Sugar's
the coffee is the ignition.
Yeah.
The catalyst to get the whole thing to kick
Right.
off.
20 minutes into this podcast, we're not going to be able to shut him up.
I'll be like Fry in Futurama when he has his 100 coffees.
And then 40 minutes into this podcast, you're going to hear him snoring.
Total crash.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Podcast on Cloudcast, episode 133. I'm Steve Tudor.
Oh, I'm Andy Lewis, just about.
I'm Sud Gill.
I'm Rory Summers, and I'm annoyed with Games Workshop.
Oh dear.
Really?
What have they done?
Ooh, what have they done now?
Does this count as an intervention?
I finally got Blood Bowl to the table at the weekend. I bought Blood Bowl when it came out, was re-released in 2016. My Norse team came out last year. Finally got it painted. I've got 2 fully painted teams. Get it to the table, and it's not until I do that on Sunday afternoon that I realise that between buying it in 2016 and now, they've released a new edition of the rules.
Ah.
And I'm a bit upset by this because the box is just called Season 2. It's not called a new edition. It's just called Season 2. So I didn't know, and now I've got to go fork out another 30 quid to get the rule book for the game that I already have a rule book for, even though it's 7 years old. I'm just annoyed.
Did they not do like a PDF version?
Oh,
No, of course they don't. If they can make 30 quid, they will, won't they? They're not like FFG or anything.
no, they're very much like Wizards of the Coast in this regard. How dare you buy a PDF of our rulebook?
Yes, indeed.
So it's not just like an errata or anything like that. I need a whole, because I was going through it because I've got a Yeti in my team, and I was like, what do claws do? What does disturbing presence do? And they're not in my rule book, and they're not in the Norse rule book. And then I found out as I was trying to investigate that they're in the 2020 rule book, otherwise known as Season 2. And I've got Season 1, and I was like, fuck.
I mean, to be fair, 40k's gone through 3 versions since 2016, so
Yes.
so you've got off light, mate.
Yeah, I know, but it's like in 7 years of this like more niche game, this box game, that they've released a new version of the rulebook 4 years after it. It was like 2016 was a big re-release for Blood Bowl, and then 4 years later they've introduced the new version, and I didn't know. I just thought it was a new different box.
Didn't there used to be a rulebook in the box?
Oh yeah, but I've got the 2016 rulebook, which doesn't cover clause on half the rules for my team.
Oh, so since then you've now bought a new team, which is for
Yeah.
the new rulebook. Oh, that's a
Yeah.
bastard. To be fair, it's a little bit on you, that one, Rory.
Well, no, because like, I've got the game. I bought the box game. I bought the core box set, and then Norse and my team. Back in the day when I used to play this 20 years ago, Norse were my team. I was waiting for them eagerly to come out. They came out in 2020. I picked them up day of release along with the rulebook, the dice, the cards, the minis. Then I went and got Forge World and got myself a nice new Yeti. Finally painted it all up. I've got 2 fully painted teams with flock. I've even got like the decals, the transfers on the bases and numbers, pads and everything, right? The works. It looks spectacular on the table, except off the table we had various different copied and pasted little word, sheets of all the rules for all the different bits we had because we didn't have it in a rule book. So I've got the rules for the Norse team. I just don't have the rules for the game that the Norse game is part of. I've got the rules for the previous version of the game.
Yeah, you're cementing my opinion of Games Workshop now.
I'm just...
Well, shall I add some more fuel to your fire there, Sid?
Oh, please do, because I do like a good rant. Now I've had half a cup of coffee, boss. I'm seeing the future.
Well, see, now the 10th edition has come out, and of course 10th editions came out, and what they've done is they've released rules for every single unit, and people have been complaining, but that their unit isn't good enough, especially for a Death Guard player. But one of the things that... Oh, you've heard about the Death Guard, haven't you? You've heard about the Death Guard.
No.
Number one, people are complaining they're not hard enough. They feel like as if certain rules are missing for what makes Death Guard Death Guard. Plague Marines. They're Space Marines, which are riddled with plague and practically immortal, and then those rules aren't applied to those models anymore. The really good one is, and you can field a unit of either 5 Death Guard or 10 Death Guard. So in the previous versions, you had to have a minimum 5 and you paid for extra model.
Right.
Current rules are 5 or 10.
Right.
Death Guard comes in boxes of 7.
Oh, that's cheeky. That is just filthy.
But the one that got me...
You need to buy 70 miniatures in order for that to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, 5 boxes. 5 boxes to get 35.
35 miniatures.
That's cheek. That's cheeky.
My one is that yesterday, I think it was, as of recording, so it would have been Monday, the 24th, they announced that certain units are now going to Legends. They're basically saying there's too many units, models they're supporting, so we need now to reduce some of them. So all scouts, all bikes, all land speeders, and they'd already announced the old classic Dreadnought have all gone into Legends and are no longer supported.
What?
Which is about 90% of my Space Marine miniature collection.
Whoa. Why don't they just say, we're not doing old versions, they're not backwards compatible, you have to buy 10 again, which obviously would piss everybody off, but it would piss everybody off unilaterally, not just wee bits of the fan base.
But it'll be a different part of the fan base the next edition. This is Games Workshop all over. Every edition, they got to piss somebody off, don't they, really?
To be fair, it's not just Games Workshop. This isn't just Games Workshop. Privateer Press recently announced War Machine and Hordes Mark IV. Well, and then they said, we can't support the massive line of miniatures either, so we're going to really cut down. I have a oh god, I can't remember the code. They're called basically like Catholics with flamethrowers in War Machine, and I've got the Everblight, which are basically Tyranids under like a non-disclosure agreement for Hordes. And those are the 2 armies which are no longer even in the setting. Never mind supported in the game.
Wow. They've done to you what they did to the squats.
Squats are back now, though.
Ooh.
We're not talking about the exercise.
No. We're talking about like space dwarves.
Space dwarves. Back where there were space dwarves.
So here's a question for you then, because I'm not that close to the old releases of Games Workshop stuff. When they make these changes, do they tell you about them as like breaking changes, or do they just quietly let it?
Oh no, they've been quite well announced with this. They have basically, and they've been quite honest with this and said, look, basically we've got too many miniatures to support. I mean, if you look at what they released, the data packs, so basically these rules, which are these PDFs for all the units. So all the rules for 10th edition are free, all the army lists are free, all the point values are free. Just download PDFs off the Warhammer community website. Most of them are like, I don't know, 20 data sheets, and you can buy the packs. They're like little index card style packs in Games Workshop stores. Most of them are like, I don't know, 10, 12 cards. The Space Marine one is like an inch thick.
Jesus.
Because there's that many different Space Marine units.
Because you've got 1,000 different types of unit. You've got all the different chapters. You've got all the different special units within each chapter, like the Deathwing and the Lehman Russ and all that lot. You've got all the presumably you've still got the Primarchs. You've got Terminators, and obviously.
There's like 5 different types of Terminator.
Yeah, have they still got the what they called? There was a special bunch of Blood Angels back in 2nd edition.
Death Guard.
No, they were black and they were basically nutters.
Death Guard, weren't they?
No, wasn't.
Templars?
No.
Death Guards were the ones who painted themselves black with a red cross on them because they all had the bloodlust.
They weren't called Death Guard back then. They were called something else. They might have evolved into Death Guard.
I'm pretty sure they've always been Death Guard. But...
No, that name does not ring a bell. They were called. I'm sure they were called something else. That's going to annoy me now, and I'm going to have to look at it.
Give it 10 minutes, it'll come to you.
Yeah, we'll talk about something else, and in the middle of someone's question later, I'll go, it's this.
Deaf Company.
Deaf Company, there you go, that's it, yes.
I know it was Deaf something.
Yes,
yeah, they're still there, yeah.
Oh, there you go, because they were ace. You could just cover the field in Death Company. But the problem is, as soon as they broke rank, they all went mental, because they failed... what was it called? Rally, or whatever it was called. And they just went, we're just going to do our own thing now and just rampage around the board.
Did I also
Anyway.
hear? You've triggered me now, Steve, with that 1 inch thick Space Marines index thing.
Hmm.
Is it? Did I imagine or did I read somewhere that the Tyranids in 10th edition had a tiny little stack compared to the Space Marines' big fat stack?
No, what you're thinking of is the Leviathan box set.
Ah,
Right.
yeah.
The Leviathan box set comes with 2 forces, and 1 Space Marine force and 1 Tyranid force. When the points values came out, there's I think it's 1,000 points of Space Marines and 750 points of Tyranids.
Oh.
What?
So out of the box, you can't have an even fight.
And there's these tiny little Tyranids, I think Ripper Swarms, they are, which is a swarm on a base. You get 2 bases of these. It's a minimum of 3.
Oh, no. It's just, it's the business model is geared up to just make money. It is not focused on the customer. It is not focused on actually making the end user happy. It's just focused on just making money.
What's really fascinating, if you got time, I highly recommend there's a podcast and he does a YouTube version of it as well called The Painting Phase, which is Peachy, who's an old army painter from Games Workshop. And the last episode that's available on the podcast, he got a guy who was like a product development person for Games Workshop, and it's fascinating discussion. You know, saying why don't Games Workshop do this? Why don't Games Workshop do that? And his thing was like, number 1, we sell tiny plastic soldiers. That's our business. Everything else around it is window dressing. Number 2, and what was it? We need to make at least £100,000 profit on every single product we make. So when you want this one thing that you can buy from this specialist company, we ain't going to do that because you're not enough customers. The other interesting one was their primary customer. They worked out who their primary customer was.
The parents of
middle-aged men
12-year-old
like us.
boys.
Yeah.
40-year-old women.
40-year-old women. 40-year-old women buying stuff for their son, yeah.
For little
or their
Johnny son
husband
of a
or
bitch.
boyfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fascinating podcast. He's brutally honest with it, but it makes perfect sense.
What was that
if you know
called
anything
again,
about
Steve?
business. It's called The Painting Phase.
Painting phase. I'll have a look at that. She sounds interesting.
I mean, from our point of view, it really just looks like Games Workshop are taking the piss. But from a business point of view, they're getting away with it.
But it's interesting. You compare it to the board game market. I always think like board game publishers really want to make people, they want you to have a good time. They want to give you everything in the box. We've talked about how they try and accommodate for solo gamers and they accommodate inserts for sleeves and stuff. They try and make sure that you have the best possible experience out of that box. Even if there's an errata, it's free. And if they notice it between it being going to print, there's always there's an extra sheet in the box. So when it gets delivered, I've got a few games that have actually been delivered with these extra components because they've realised something is missing. Board game publishers do everything they can. They fall over themselves to make sure you get a good experience. Everything you need to play is in that box.
Which is why Games Workshop makes a profit and most board game manufacturers don't.
That's the point.
Board game, yeah.
I mean, look at the number of potentially failed Kickstarters out there because people can't manage their budget properly.
Imagine, because they're trying to please everybody.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't. You cannot please everybody. You can't do it.
But put in a box that, if the unit can only comes in 5s and 10s, then the box should only have 5 or 10 models.
Oh, no, this is because they changed the rules after the box came out. This is like 2-3 years after the
Right.
box came out. They've updated the rules, and the rules don't match what's in the boxes. So, yeah, maybe if they refresh the range, it might come with 10. But it's there's this lag, because you get the version lag in.
And because they're
anything
supporting
Warhammer.
previous stuff, you've
Yeah.
got this
Yeah.
disconnect. Okay, that's
Still.
slightly more forgivable.
When I look into my Spike magazine, issue 14, with the Blood Bowl Norse team rules, and I want to know what the rules are for Drunkard, because it applies to my team, the rules should be in the goddamn magazine. I shouldn't have to go look it up in a different book, which I don't own because I didn't know it existed. All the rules for my team should be in the goddamn book that I paid for.
He has spoken.
That reminds me of running Storm King's Thunder for D&D. When there's a point where they meet a ghost, and the ghost gives you a quest, and that quest is in another campaign book.
I'm sorry, your quest is in another castle.
basically sends them to a quest on Tourney of Dragons.
Ooh.
And basically says, run chapter 10 of Tourney of Dragons. It's like, they've already ran that, though. I need to come up with a new quest now. I mean, we take all this piss out of Games Workshop, but they've just announced the new Epic. And
I saw that because I've seen people painting like little wee ones, and I thought, oh, is Epic back? Because I've seen the Darren Latham second edition Space Marine challenge that he's issued. So people are repainting the older models in the new style.
Yeah.
But yes, I've seen a couple of people painting like little baby rhinos and things. I thought, oh, hello.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I thought. Ooh.
I quite enjoyed Epic when I was back in the day, and then they released.
Epic was my game.
Yep, and they released Titan Legion, so you had your Imperator and all that lot, and that was on the table for precisely 1 round because every other miniature on the board fired at it to take it out.
Yep.
But the Gargants were fun.
Yeah, this is Horus Heresy, so it's going back to the original version of Epic.
Ooh,
so it's going to be Space Marine versus Space Marine.
Ooh, is that 30? Is that pretty much 30k then?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Right, then should we jump into some board games, fellas? This is lots of miniature talk this evening, today, whenever you're listening to this.
Wow, you suck.
Well, should we start with talking about a board game which has got some miniatures, even though they're quite superfluous, that we've played recently?
Superfluous miniatures in a board game? Surely not.
I don't know what you mean. There's no such thing.
Whilst on the subject of making customers happy and not making them pay far too much for something. Oh, wait.
Let's talk about the new super fancy special edition Castles of Burgundy, which cost quite a bit of money, comes with all these miniatures, and is otherwise identical to the version that you can pick up for 30 quid.
I wouldn't know, because I have not yet received it. So you lot can just carry on, and I'm going to eat my sandwiches or something. Go for a brew.
Double coffee, mate. It'll help.
Is that because you've gone for the super deluxe version, Andy?
I may have added a few additionally more superfluous items, yes.
I see. That would explain it then.
It probably would, yes. Although I did see a photograph today from someone in the States who seems to have received similar items to what I ordered, so I am quietly hopeful I might get them in the next month or so, because the US seems to get stuff before the UK most of the time.
So what's in the special edition version that you've got then, Steve?
Right, so I have got the gameplay version, which I think the one below had didn't have the plastic tiles for the goods. So I have got I've got the gameplay version, which has new artwork all the way through. Your board is a recessed board and has a plastic insert which goes in, which means all your hexes slot into the right place. So no jiggling around. As I said before, plastic goods tiles. The actual tiles in the board are normal cardboard. Your victory points marker is a little plastic mini. Your turn order thing is a little plastic tower, which stacks on top of each other. And there are castles, actually 3D miniature castles for the Castles of Burgundy.
Actually, the castles are castles.
And they're burgundy coloured. Now, which annoyed me because we played an older version on BGA when I played it against you, which is obviously the original version, and the Castles of Burgundy are not burgundy, which after playing a version which the castles were burgundy, I was quite annoyed by this. It's like, well, sure, that's in the description. This trades goods act, this should be. But it also
I really hope you know it's Burgundy the place, not Burgundy the colour.
Where the colour comes from the wine.
Where the wine comes from, that's all I know it as.
Yeah. There's also some other stuff in there. There's, I think, 14 expansions in the box.
14?
14 expansions. Now, the first 5 are stuff you can just pile them in the normal game. They're, like the extra tiles, they're extra maps.
You've got like geese.
There's some extra minor things.
There's like the mill and something
What
like
have I
that.
ordered?
And then there's several big expansions. There's like a vineyard expansion, which I haven't even looked at yet. And then there's another there must be like another. Oh, there's new types of castles and inns, and there's ones you can basically blend in. So I've already mixed in like the first 4 expansions after the first game because they're all things that just add a little bit of variety rather than changing the game. But
yeah, they're going to add new yellows or new beige.
Yeah.
More
And new
importantly, have you managed to pack it all into the box in a sensible way now?
yes,
Hooray.
and a little hint for you, Andy, which I didn't get first time. Right, it gives you bags for the tiles.
Yes.
Right, and it doesn't explain the difference between the black tiles and the mine tiles, which are also black. Because there's a central market in the game. We're always going to explain the game a bit in the middle, in a minute. And there's like a central market. So you have markets based on the dice, and you have a central market which you can buy tiles from. But those tiles are called black tiles, and they're designated because they've got a black back and a little black spot at the bottom. But the bloody rulebook doesn't explain that. We had to work that out backwards. So they should go in the bag, whereas the mine should go in one little trays. And that solves half the problem because all of a sudden the trays now fit the pieces in, which should have them in there.
Right.
Thank you for the tip. I shall now duly forget that until I start unpacking it and go,
Yes.
We wait for your message of rant.
Yes.
And Steve
Yes.
going, I told you that.
you did tell me that. Well, so how did you play this Stefan Feld supposedly good game then?
This Stefan Feld amazing game. So Steve, Sid, and I met up last week on Board Game Arena and got booted up Discord, and we had a bit of a chat so we could play this through live. But Castles of Burgundy, classic game, Stefan Feld. You've got a map. You can always play the same map or different maps depending on how adventurous you're feeling, and ultimately you are trying to build up your fiefdom, and the different types of tiles represent different types of industry within your fief. So you've got the castles, which are dark green. You've got some special buildings, which are all yellow. You've got your buildings, which are all beige. You've got pastures, which are green, light green, and you have ships, which are blue. And you are going to be, in your turn, you will roll 2 dice, and those dice will dictate which depot you can go to. So the central board has got 6 different areas. Each area will have a number of tiles in it of a particular type, and the number and type changes depending on the player count. So if you rolled a 3, you can go to the number 3 depot and collect 1 tile from there. And then your other dice would be a 4. Your other dice, would be a 4. You can place that tile you've just picked up, hopefully, on any space which is a matching colour and is value number 4.
Okay.
You will do this. You'll either pick up tiles or you'll place tiles. You can have 3 that you can just keep to one side in your little cache. So I could pick up 2 in one turn and hopefully place 2 next turn. And they all have different abilities. So the green, the light green, which is your pastures, will score you points. So you'll pick up a tile with 3 sheep on it, that will give you 3 points. You pick up some more sheep later on, you'll score for the sheep you've just placed, and for any sheep that are previously in that pasture. You take a bank will give you some money. Take a mine, put a mine down, that's going to give you money at the beginning of every round. It's a really, really straightforward, simple dice game, essentially. You roll 2 dice, they dictate your decisions. And there are ways to mitigate them. With workers, you can adjust the die up or down for either purchasing a tile or placing a tile. But fundamentally, that's what the game is. You're trying to get the sets together, like all my light greens filled, all my blues filled. Each one will give you different perks and benefits. And that ultimately is the game. And it is in that simplicity of roll 2 dice, make decisions based on those, and keep your options open for later on in the game. I utterly love this game. It's the game that when friends suggested that I join Board Game Arena, that was the first game I thought, I'll give this one a go because it's a Stefan Feld game and I've liked his previous games. I gave it a go and my mates and I utterly fell in love with it, and we played it over and over and over again, to the point where I've then gone and bought myself a physical copy just so we can play it physically. But I absolutely adore this game. It's never going to leave my shelf. When it came to GameFound, I was very, very tempted, but I was put off by the price tag because I've got everything I need. I think I've got all 14 expansions in my Ravensburger edition, and I've got it at a fraction of the cost. But I've only ever played it once, and yet I've played this game maybe 30 or 40 times. 99.9% of those have been on Board Game Arena because the UI is utterly fantastic for it.
Nice. It sounds weirdly, remarkably reminiscent actually of Marrakesh when I played at Expo. Obviously, Marrakesh came afterwards, but it sounds like there were elements of Marrakesh that have been used in Burgundy. Like, instead of rolling dice in Marrakesh, you basically choose from a sort of a cube tower. You choose a bunch of colours, and those colours activate matching colours on your player board, but you can only, and then you activate those colours with workers. So you've kind of got to think like way, way ahead of what you're doing. So it sounds like there's elements there that are similar.
But the only possible annoying thing is it's very difficult to plan ahead in this game.
Very, very possible. Like, I was planning to pick up some castles, and then Steve just went and bought them all.
I had a blinder. Towards it was the last turn of the game, so we had 5 rounds, I think it is per turn, or turns per round, I can remember which round it goes. And if you place a castle, you get another go, and I managed to snaffle all 3 castles that were left before Rory could pick one up, and he was most annoyed because I filled up all my castle spaces and scored loads of points.
Because I only needed one more to get to complete my castles and pick up the bonus tile, and Steve did it just before me.
Indeed. So what you can do is, as Rory said, you can mitigate things by having workers, and sometimes you have to spend a dice to get more workers. And you can also use money to buy tiles in the central market if you haven't got the dice. But it is a game where I find it stops and starts a bit, because you roll your dice and you suddenly go, ooh, crap, what am I going to do with these? And bizarrely, it's a little bit easier the later you are in the turn order, because you have a bit more time to think about it. And then you do that, and some idiot goes and takes the tile you want. Which was mostly Sid when we played.
Nice, well done, Sid.
I tried my best.
It felt like we were being hustled by Sid, to be fair.
There
was a point where...
Yeah, Sid was... It's my first game. He utterly trounced us.
Well, until the end, and you beat me by a point.
Ooh, I beat you by 20 points.
Won,
No, I
won.
Steve won.
Yeah, Steve won.
Did you come last, Rory?
Yeah.
No,
That's not
you
like
didn't. No, you came.
did.
You came 1 point ahead of me. You cleaned up on the last turn. I was a point behind you in the end.
Did I? I can't remember the scores. I just assumed I'd come last because I was trailing for the entire game.
I did an annoying thing that always happens to me. I had everything set up and I needed one more turn. And if I got me one more turn, I would have been minted. But nope, I misjudged it and got it wrong and came last. After starting quite strongly, because for a while there I thought I've played this before, but I hadn't. And it was, I tell you what though, it's a damn good game.
It's a nice level, isn't it? It's not quite heavy Euro, but at the same time, it's a bit more advanced than, say, Ticket to Ride. You've got to think. Got to think about it.
It had the right amount of chew to it for me. That kind of
And I think every turn is very different as well. Depends on what you roll.
And it's very easy to learn. It was quick to pick up as well, and I kind of think playing midweek of an evening for a couple of hours we played for was spot on. I tell you what, I really enjoyed that. I went to bed thinking about how I messed up and how I could do better next time.
Now that's a sign of a good game. If you're thinking about it, it's like when you go play someone else's house and you're thinking about the game on the drive home.
Yes,
that means you've played a good game.
It does. Yeah. Oh, well, 3 of you say it's good. I'm now feeling slightly more relieved that I haven't made a complete cock up and a purchase.
I would also say as well, the Awakened Realm Special Edition is gorgeous and uses some actual proper colours rather than just shades of brown, which
Hooray!
Was a Euro game thing of 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that every game had to be grey or shades of brown. But this actually uses primary colours, which makes it quite pretty.
Excellent. I might be able to see things then. That's good news.
Yeah.
Hooray. Oh, well, I look forward to receiving it and probably hating it because you 3 like it. Ha!
I'm sure Rory would take the bits off your hand.
I don't know if he wants to pay the exorbitant amount of money it's all costs, so probably not. Well, I look forward to receiving it.
You should, mate. I really, really enjoyed it. Just it's everything the guys have just said, but I thought in a very accessible kind of fashion. It wasn't too hard to learn. I think Rory took 5-10 minutes roughly to explain it to me, just to talk me through what was on the board, where things were. Like more or less what he's done now today. Actually, it was all it needed to get going with it. and it's a very fun game. And you know, there's a few things that clicked really quickly. There's a few things I say I went away thinking, oh, okay, if I'd done something slightly differently, taken a few different choices along the way, I would have played out. You know, that would have been more efficient in my turns. And I think, as Steve says, that for me is what I want to leave a game thinking about is that kind of feeling, because that tells you you've enjoyed it enough at the time, but you've also enjoyed it afterwards. So it feels like good value for money. And
That's
as
good.
I say, I want to go back and I want to play it again. I really want to play it again.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm now quite excited to receive it. Damn it. According to this, you also played something else in my absence.
Well, this is Disney animated from Funko, and Steve and I played this the other week, and Sid and I played a demo of this at the UK Games Expo, and we've talked about it very, very briefly on our live episode. But I've now played this game at 2, 3, 4 players. I think I've played it about 4 or 5 times now in total, so I've got a much more formed opinion of it. And Steve can chip in too, because I think Steve and Amanda joined in for one, didn't you? So
can I write my opinion down on a piece of paper, and then after you've said your opinion, I can show the boys what I thought of it, and we'll see if we now align.
Yeah, why not? That sounds like it could be fun. Yeah.
I'll do that. You carry on talking.
I already know what Andy's opinion of this game would be.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's Disney. It's going to be a steaming turd. But anyway.
It's not just because it's Disney. This is a Prospero Hall game. And Steve and I had our conversation about this. It's a Prospero Hall game. It's published by Funko. It is aimed at a very specific part of the market. That market is not me.
Sounds like
but that doesn't mean it is a bad game. I actually think it's actually a very good co-op game. I think it's a very enjoyable game.
Are you just being nice?
No, I think.
Oh no! Let's wait until we described it all. We'll come back to this, I think. And I've just seen Sid write it down. He used his best handwriting as well.
Has he put it in an envelope?
Concentrating. He's put an envelope and sealed it.
No, I haven't quite gone that far. But
you going for the wax and the king's ring to.
I've written it down twice because one's a word I might not be allowed to say, so I've written it 2 times.
Right.
Okay, right. Tell us about this game then, Rory.
Well, do you want to talk us through this, Steve? Because I already did all my talking over Castles of Burgundy.
Oh, you did. Yes. I mean, everyone wants to hear my voice, obviously. So, Animated is it's a cooperative game in which you take one kind of scene from a Disney film each, and you have to build that scene. So you have to paint the background and lay the characters on top, and you have to do that before your time runs out, which of course is a little tracker on the side of the board. And then you have baddies, which your baddies are based on the villain from the film in which that scene comes. So every time you play, you'll have a different mixture of 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these scenes with representative baddies. And it's a typical co-op game is you've got limited actions to do things. And at the end of the round, the bad guys will do stuff nasty, which, if you're not careful, will make this track ramp up. The game works by you can take a series of actions. You've got cards in your hand, and there's a lot of moving pieces. Actually, it's surprisingly this is more complicated to describe than Castles of Burgundy, because Castle of Burgundy is roll 2 dice, make you spend those dice. Here you've got several different actions you can take, which are things like you can build the background. You can I think it's 5 different actions.
You've got 5 different actions. You've got background, paint your character, grab paint.
Magic
There's sound,
power,
which is your magic ability. Then you have magic, which is kind of like a wild card ability. And then there's cards. Animate, which is collect cards.
Animate, which is get cards.
Yeah.
And the way this works is these actions are cards laid out in a rack. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you pick the card, the power of that ability is based on where it is. And once you do it, it goes to the bottom of the rack, and the rack slides all along. So, of course, if you take the same action over and over again, it's not going to be as powerful. If you can wait for an action to go right to the very end, it becomes uber powerful.
Right, okay.
So that's the real balance. That's the real trying to work out what you have to do amongst your players, because you don't want to all take the paint action, because everyone will just get 1 pot of paint. which will be no good. So you do this to gain some resources, which are usually the paints on the cards. You spend them to put background pieces in. You spend them to do the sound action. You spend it to do magic, which allows you to do extra things. Of course, what you want to do to keep the economy going is you want to try and chain these actions. Try and get your special ability, which will help Rory. Rory does his special ability that helps Amanda. Amanda does his special ability that helps Rory. So everyone can kind of do more than one action. Keep going to try and beat the clock. To hinder you, you have, I can't remember the name of them, but they're basically penalty cards out. And these are things you have to spend. So these are basically resources you have to spend before the end of the round. Well, you don't have to spend them. Basically, if you don't spend the resources to get rid of these cards, worse things happen. So you might lose cards, you might lose time on the track, you might
calamity cards. Yeah.
Calamity cards. But these usually require you to spend something. They may require you to spend a specific card. They may require you to spend a colour of paint.
To do a specific action, so you've got to do the number 2 action.
Do the action that's in the 2 slot.
Yeah.
So you can take a shit action. And so there's also that balance about doing these. Also, I should say, this thing looks really pretty. You are actually building this scene from a Disney film. So you're putting in background, which is like jigsaw pieces, which is like a sort of polyominoes kind of thing. And so the bigger the pieces take more resources to do. So once you've got all the pieces in, you can fire off this like action. Once you put once you cover certain spaces up, that allows you to do bonus actions. Once you've filled your background on these like 4 slots, you can then put your characters in. The characters on little see-through pieces of plastic. So actually like little cartoon acetates, and they go on and they get bonus points as well. So it all looks absolutely beautiful and looks really clever when you do it. And the only other thing to talk about is the bad guys at the end. Each bad guy affects things in a slightly different way, but they'll affect you based on how good or badly you got rid of these calamities.
So the more calamity cards you have left, the more times the bad guy will activate.
Yes.
Right.
And then these get shuffled through and cycled through, so you don't get the same bad guy over and over again. They take turns, and so that means you've got a bit of predictability. You can say, "Oh,
you know the Queen of Hearts is coming up. Then it's going to be Jafar, and we know that when Jafar turns up, this is going to be the bad guy thing. So we need to kind of plan ahead for that.
And the usual co-op thing of, well, we can waste that resource. It doesn't matter. Or crap, if that hits, we're in serious trouble. So we need to stop that from happening. That typical kind of co-op game thing. So, rules-wise and mechanics-wise, there's actually a bit of complexity to it. However, I didn't think as a co-op game it was very hard.
Oh, no.
Now, we played it on normal.
Yeah.
We played it on normal, and we beat it on the first game.
Whoa, okay.
I've played it on normal every time I've played it, and I've beaten it every single time. And I've not just beaten it, I've trounced it. It's like... and using the pandemic analogy here, it's like not only did I cure everything, I eradicated all the diseases as well. And I did it every single time. But it's that type of thing. But with Disney, I think every time I've played it, the people around the table, there's been this huge focus on, we are not having any calamity cards there. We are not going to take any hits. Because I've played this with gamers. We are not... If we can mitigate this risk, we will mitigate it. If it means I've got to take a suboptimal action to mitigate risk, I'll do it. And because I've done that every time, like when Steve, Amanda, and I finished it, the deadline, I think if the deadline reaches number 13, it's game over. Our deadline we were only at 8. We had bags of time. Bags and bags of time. But that's happened every single time because the way I play and the people I play with, we are, no. This is a bad thing. I don't want bad things to happen.
I think you hit the nail on the head. You said you played it with gamers.
Yeah.
And this isn't aimed at gamers. This is aimed at families and kids.
Absolutely. This is going to be on sale in Waterstones, in WH Smith's. It's going to be attracted to people that want to play a Disney-based game that looks really pretty. That does not mean it is a bad game. I just think it's a shame that there isn't this is expert mode. You've got,
hard mode then?
No, there is a hard difficulty. I don't want a hard difficulty. I want a gamer mode. I almost want some extra rules to make it more complicated, to make it more of a challenge. Because the difference between easy, normal, and hard is you just add more calamity cards. So I think when Steve, Amanda, and I played it, there were 4 of us. We had 5 calamity cards or 4 calamity cards. We'd just go up to 6. It just means that chances are we're always going to have 1 or 2. But that isn't a way to make it more interesting. That's just a way to make it harder. But I don't want it to be harder. I want it to be harder, and I want it to be more interesting.
Yeah, it makes it take longer rather than make it harder, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, it just.
Makes everything cost more resources rather than.
Is there not a time limit on it then? Because you said there's a track on the right.
There is. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The difficulty thing just makes it so you have to spend more resources to get rid of the calamity cards, which basically just makes it take longer rather than make it more difficult.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's not like I'm going to use my favourite analogy of food, right? It's not like putting more ingredients into your dish. It's just like putting more rice on it.
Right.
Right. If you can have like a chili con carne, right? That's an all right chili con carne, right? But the difference between a good chili con carne and a great chili con carne isn't more rice. It's
jalapenos.
Actually, I think I've got a better analogy. Sorry, Rory.
I don't know. Sid looked like he enjoyed my.
I did enjoy that. I think that's a very
more gamer-related analogy. Like pandemic. Pandemic, the difficulty is due to the number of epidemic cards in. And the reason epidemic cards make it difficult is they reset everything. So you've reset your learning and they add more chaos to things. This is the equivalent of just making that outbreak tracker longer.
Oh, that makes it easier then.
Oh, no, it would make it shorter. It makes it
shorter or longer. Just shorter or longer. Yeah, just moving the outbreak tracker rather than increasing the number of epidemics.
Right.
It's that. It just makes the game quicker or longer, doesn't actually make the game harder. As I said, pandemic, the epidemics that is what adds the chaos, which is the unpredictability, which means you can't plan for it. This would just make it.
Yeah, I think that's what it would need. It would need something to do with the bad guys that added more chaos to have them be more destructive.
Okay.
But it's not aimed at us.
No.
It's not aimed at gamers. So now where I'm intrigued, what I'm trying to balance in my head is this better or worse than Villainous? Because Villainous is an extremely popular game, extremely popular Disney game, but I have the problem that thing takes far too long to play. I think it's a good game for the audience, but I think it could do with being like half the length it is. And I think animated actually wins in that regard, and it's a quicker game.
Yeah. I really like the co-op element of animated. I feel it feels like a very different co-op game. There's the obvious, when we talk about a co-op game, you always talk about Pandemic. And I think with this, it doesn't feel like that at all. Because I know, right, I want background at 4, but I've got to really be considerate about, actually, if I move it to 4, by the time it gets to Steve, it's only going to be at 2, and Steve really needs it to be at higher than 2. So then we have to come up with a plan about how I can do the thing I want to do, and Steve can still do the thing he wants to do, and it still be good for everybody else at the table as well. And we had some really interesting discussions about, we need to do this first, you should do this. And there was no quarterbacking because everyone's got this slightly different opinion, because everyone's at a slightly different place in their mini game, where they are in their scene, and about what they are trying to achieve. And you need to take that into account in this. You need to kind of step back and see the bigger picture of it as well. And that felt really interesting and was really, really good.
Go on then, Sid. Do your grand unveiling of the envelope.
Oh, wow.
That is exactly the word I was going to suggest.
Now, let me explain. I won't say what I've written on my card for the viewer, for the listeners. Right? Everyone will guess. But let me just rephrase what I'm saying. I found this game tiresome and tedious. And I'd also disagree that this is a game aimed at families and children. It's too hard for them and too easy for the likes of yous. It doesn't know where it's going or what it's sat. But if I put this in front of Sue, the only reason I'd get it on the table is because it's Disney on the box. She would find it too difficult to play and too difficult to enjoy. Not because it's particularly complex, but because there's a lot of moving parts. Everybody's doing something slightly different. The co-op element would mean that the strongest voice at the table would drive it. And if you're a family, that's going to be one of the parents. So you're dragging the kids along. The whole thing for me doesn't work. I did not get on with it. I mean, I've played it less than you guys, so I've not played it all the way to the end. But in the hour or so that I did play it at Expo, it just didn't work for me. I was bored out of my mind. And
I think it's an interesting point. It's like I couldn't put this in front of my kids. No. And Logan's 7, and it's too complicated. There's too many moving parts.
Yeah, it's exactly
for a young child. You'd need, that's a good point.
You'd be playing with yourself. You'd be playing with yourself with 3 other people at the table who you were dragging along for,
and I'm just
family time.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not. It would be awful as an experience with family. I think for me, it just wouldn't work. Maybe if you've got a family that is more capable, more skilled at it, you love the IP or the license with Disney and stuff. Yeah, all right, you might get a bit more out of it, but heck, no, not for me.
I think this is targeted at casual gamers.
Yeah, as you said, it's a Waterstone shelf, isn't it?
It's the Waterstones,
yeah.
People will pick it up because of the name of the box.
Yeah. I mean, when you go to buy a board game, if the first place you look to buy a board game is Amazon, then this is probably a bit for you. Because if your go-to shop to buy a board game is Amazon or Waterstones, then fill your boots. This is exactly for you. I think it's an interesting co-op ability. I think it's an interesting little puzzle. It's not a particularly hard game at all. For me, I need it to be more interesting to keep it coming back to the table or to get it to the table ever again. It looks really nice.
I think for me, I think we should do a public service, though, and tell people to buy Pandemic and enjoy it than buy this. It's a better Waterstones game.
Yeah, true. And it is in Waterstones, you're right.
You'll get that in Tesco's, for goodness sake. It's not like it's some kind of niche market that you can only buy Pandemic in a shop with curtains over the door.
What games are you playing, Sid?
Oh, I've been to a lot of exotic places in my time.
Well, let's draw a veil over this inconsequential faff that you lot have just spent 20 minutes describing.
You never go near it.
I won't.
Promise
I have absolutely no intention.
Promise me you'll never go near it.
It's definitely not blowing my skirt up, gentlemen.
It's not for you, Andy, and it's not for us.
Well, evidently, it's got Disney written on it. Right, let us move on to greater things. Because you've just talked about a simple game that sounds far too complicated. Now I'm going to talk about a game that is very complicated. And that is Dominant Species Marine. So this is like the sort of C version of Dominant Species. Now I've been playing this with my sort of Thursday night Bewdley group. And we've played it twice now. So a 4-player game. And the idea is that you are a species or a type of species, a sort of... what's the best way of putting it? A kind of... I don't know what the exact biological nomenclature is, but you are like either fish or crustaceans or that, the sort of part of the sort of major part of the kingdom. Possibly I don't think so, but it's a bit higher than that because there are many, many species within, say, fish. There are many species within crustaceans, so etc. It's a wee bit further up the tree than that. But the idea is that you are trying to populate the Earth in the early growing period of our planet with various species of your type or whatever the hell it is, and it's a hex-based game, and each hex represents a different type of terrain.
Is it a genus?
So you sort of start in the sea, but the idea is
that the one above a species?
You can sort of progress onto land as the idea is that obviously you crawl out of the sea and go onto the land, and there are various ways of scoring points. So you can score points by basically putting stuff onto the map. You can score points by adding hexes to the map, so you can create larger and larger areas of a particular type of terrain, which gets you sort of points for almost like creating a set, for example. You can score points for putting your species on, basically controlling a tile. There's like ranked point scoring, things like 8, 4, 2, 1 for first, second, third, and fourth in terms of number of cubes on a hex, for example. and they get more valuable the sort of further from the ocean you get. So you start the ocean, you get like 1 or 2 points for winning the tile, and if you get to the land, which is really hard to do, you'll get like 8 points. So there's loads of points there. But you can also introduce catastrophic events during the game, like drawing cards. Which can, like, say, for example, drop an asteroid onto the middle of the map and just wipe everybody out and go, right, that's you lot, sling your hooks. You can create things like geysers, which are quite good at, like, basically annihilating pretty much everybody on the space, and it reduces the value of a space as well. So there's a lot of competition. It's a very aggressive game. There's a lot of player interaction here. So if you don't like being shoved around and shot, then it's probably not going to be for you. But it is pretty much in your interests to maintain control and become a, say, for example, dominant species. And ultimately, the game is driven by action selection. I'm not going to say worker placement because it's more like action selection. So on the right-hand side of the board, there's a bunch of these things, and there are several spaces for various different actions. So anywhere from basically picking a foodstuff, so your species can only eat particular types of food. So at certain points in the game, if your species aren't fed, they will die, and they literally become extinct, and they get wiped off the board. So some of the actions are you can basically either put a food token on your board to say this is the food that my species will eat, so that other people can, when they've put sort of tokens on the board, you've basically got a more diverse eatery. Or you can put food tokens on the board so that your species have access to the food tokens that they eat. You can do both, but they can change. They can be moved around, so you got to keep an eye on that as well. But ultimately, the actions are driven by this sort of action selection on the right hand side. You get a bunch of these sort of cylinders, but the magic of it is, and this is the really clever thing, and it reminded me a little bit of what's that Egypt game? Ankh. I think it was Ankh. So when you put an action down on Ankh, you cannot play before that. You have to always go afterwards. Dominant species is the same. So if you've put say one of your action cylinders down on like one of the second or third action, you cannot afterwards do the first or second action. You have to keep going further down the action pool. So you can't just keep sort of doing the same one over and over again. So if you've put your token on, say, the first action space of one action, you can go on the second one because it's afterwards, but you can't go previous to it. So if you go on the second one, you can't go on the first, for example. There are exceptions to that, so you can essentially choose to dominate a particular type of food group, which gives you these sort of special white cylinders which can go anywhere. But even then, there are some restrictions. So the idea is that you can start to do what's like evolution, things like that, which is controlling hexes, moving things around. You can migrate, so you can move your species around, so you can come out of the ocean, score some points, etc., etc. And then you get, I think they're called event cards, so basically these cards that you choose, which will then do special actions on the board. Mostly bad, I'm not going to lie. So yeah, literally you can cause plagues, species can be completely wiped off a particular type of terrain. You can introduce game effects that will be persistent until that card gets binned off out of play. So you've really got to keep an eye on what's going on. And of course, the different types of terrain are various levels of accessible, and they also cost different types of resource. And some of them, they're drawn at random, so there's not necessarily a link between one particular action that uses some terrain and another particular action that uses the similar type of terrain. So if there's no link, you've really got to think about how you want to plan your actions ahead. And then if you have no more little sort of cylinders left, you do the sort of clear up action, which is good for you because you get your action cubes back, but it's also good for everybody else because it clears off the spaces that you've used so they can go back in your place. So you've really got to think about what's going on. You're like, oh, that player's got to take their stuff back. I'll just hold off on doing their action because that's going to be cleared next time. Things like that. So it's very, very, very clever. I really enjoyed it. I got a real huff on the first time I played it because I basically played badly. It wasn't the game's fault because I didn't get the connection between the randomness of the tiles being drawn out to say which types of terrain you'll score on when you evolve. And basically, I decided, right, I'm going to evolve. I'm going to run towards the land and score all of my points that way. Turns out, it's not that simple. So I got a proper hoof on. But then we played it again, and everybody knew how to play it because it was the same 4 people, and it was far more enjoyable. So we got the king set the first time. But I really, really enjoyed it. And it's not the sort of game that you probably play that often with a sort of regular gaming group because it is a long game. It's probably 4 hours.
Wow. Jeez.
Okay.
Yeah, it's long. Yeah, basically you go through this whacking great deck of cards, but you can reduce the deck. So we kind of artificially shortened it.
I have got the BGG page up, and it does say 120 to 240 minute playtime. So
yes.
you are right in there. That sort of playtime is accurate.
Wow.
Yes. I mean, we took 3 hours, and we'd taken, there's a big deck of cards. There must be about 20 or 30 cards in it, and we took about 10 or 15 of them out. Just to get through the game in the time.
And is that the time limit then? This deck experience?
Yeah, this deck basically runs out. So these cards come out, and there's 5 of them, and depending on where you play on the action bit that controls choosing one of those cards, determines which cards you can choose from. So there's 1 to 5, they're numbered, and the action spaces are numbered. 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 5, for example. But they're obviously you need to go earlier in turn order in order to pick the most. So the later you go, the less choice you've got, for example. And then so you've got to make sure that you're picking the right one, and you've got to tie it all together. There's a lot going on. You're not going to get it all right. But the game length is basically determined by this deck of cards. And in the final 5 cards, which you sort of shuffle up to start, there's an asteroid. And that's basically when the asteroid comes out, that's the end of the game. You bang an asteroid into the middle of the map, and everything around where that asteroid lands is essentially just annihilated. And I would have won the last game had I not been smack bang in the middle of that asteroid. Literally about 80% of my species just got wiped off the planet, which I thought was unsporting. But it is very, very, very good.
No.
If you don't mind a long game. Rules-wise, it's not actually that complicated either. And I have to say, it's probably one of the best summary cards in a game I've seen. Literally, I could give you the summary card, and you'd be able to play the entire game.
Oh, really?
It's literally, here are all the actions. This is what you do for each action. Go. All of the iconography is on the board, so you can tell what the costs are for each tile, what the costs are, and what the bonus points are for each combination of tiles. So, like, the more tiles there are, it kind of scales upwards. So if you have 1 tile, you get 1 point, 2 tiles is 3 points, 3 tiles is 6 points, and so on and so forth. All of that's on the board. Everything is there, apart from like 1 rule, which you'll remember anyway. So I could literally just give you the summary card and go, right, we're playing the game. You wouldn't have a clue what to play, what the strategy is, but that doesn't matter.
Dear. But no, I've heard lots of good things about this game, to be fair. It's one of those games that I remember people saying, God, 5-10 years ago, oh, yeah, it's a top game. This is because it is an old game, like 12 years old, something like that.
Yeah, I know dominant species have been around quite a while. I'd not heard of the marine variant until my friend Andrew sort of brought it in and said, I really want to play this game. Can we play it? And we're like, yeah, totally. So I hadn't realised it was quite as long as it is. But to be honest, I like a long game, as you know, so it didn't really bother me. But for those people who wanted to finish before 10 o'clock at night, well, I would quite happily have gone on until the pub shuts, but apparently people want to get to their beds.
Apparently, it's supposed to be quicker than dominant species.
So I've heard.
Dominant species.
Yeah, I think they've shaved a few corners off with marine. The way the turn order is slightly different. Oh, that's something else. Yes, each of the species has a kind of a pecking order. So if you're on a tile and you're tying for like dominance, the pecking order will then determine who actually breaks the tie. Like the fish, I think, is it the fish or the something else? It's like they will eat everybody else based on a tie, but having the most powerful species that will do that means you go later in turn order. So it kind of balances out. I'm not convinced it works. If my one criticism of the game is I don't think that pecking order actually works or is worth it, I should say. So if you've got the tie-breaking species, the more powerful one, I don't think the loss of turn order is made up for in the tiebreak, if that makes sense. I think you suffer too much detriment in going last compared to the benefit you get from breaking ties. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Either that or we've all missed something and we've played it slightly wrong, but which wouldn't be like us at all. But no, I really, really enjoyed it. I would be happy to play it again. Almost to the point of potentially buying it, but I don't need to because I can just borrow it off my friend Andrew. So I would be interested to play original Dominant Species.
Who are you and what have you done with Andy?
Well, I know. No, I know. Well, you know.
Kickstarter Deluxe Edition will be launched next week and it'll be all in.
Do you know what? I probably would be. Yeah. I would quite like to play the original just to see what they're like, just to compare it. But I've been informed that Dominant Species Marine is a slightly more streamlined version of Dominant Species. I don't know how, because I haven't played the first one.
I was convinced I'd played this game, but I haven't. I played Evolution, which is a very, very different game, although the same theme. Let's delve into the mailbag. Since you've been quiet, apart from waving naughty words at us on paper. So pick a question from the mailbag for us.
I haven't even read them this week. Sorry.
Oh, God, that's coming. That's going to be on your annual review.
I chose dinner instead of doing my homework.
That's not a bad idea, actually. A hungry Sid is a grumpy Sid.
Yeah,
that's true.
I'll tell you what. Right, okay. I'll segue us in.
Ooh. Strap yourselves in, boys.
The reason I've been quiet, Steve, is because I've been catching up on my homework.
Ooh.
All right. Because I've been
in the lesson.
In the lesson, yeah. I was that kind of kid.
Sat on the back doing his homework frantically before the teacher wants it handed in.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, nobody else do that? Surely everybody does the bit of that.
Yes.
So no, because Mr. Mark Cook has asked us the question, which is, have we been keeping an eye on the Gen Con and Essen preview lists? And if we have, what are we most interested in?
Well,
so
I've got a short list.
He's got a list. I was going to say, my first answer to the first part of the question is no, I've not been keeping an eye on it.
I think by my admission just there, I think it's quite damning in that no, I haven't been keeping any attention to it. But I have now. I've looked now.
Oh, right, okay, go on then.
I don't have a short list. Because the reason I don't have a short list, right, I'll tell you a simple reason I don't have a short list, because there's nothing that jumped at me that I've not already seen at Expo.
I have been looking at this list, and I did kind of think, because you mentioned the Essen one as well, and I would say 90% of it is stuff we saw at Expo.
It's true.
But
I felt that too.
There's one that we got spoken to about at Expo. We never saw it, and that's Barcelona from Board and Dice.
True.
That's Danny Garcia's Barcelona, this big heavyweight city builder, which looks really, really good, and it's, you know. Is it Gen Con, or I think it's Gen Con is going to be available for demo, if not to buy. I'm really excited to hear more about that. Although it's another Gen Con release is Arborea from Alicat Games, which is another Danny Garcia game, which I was lucky enough to review, and that melted my brain. So
I was going to say that's that complicated tree game, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now I enjoyed it, but it did melt my head. So I think it might be a bit too heavy for me to like enjoy, and I think Barcelona might be the same, but I think for you, particularly Andy, I think it might hit.
I was going to say, give it to the professionals. Come on, give it to the adult. Actually, weirdly, I have been looking at a lighter game, so we should swap. The only reason I know this is because there's a game called Taiwan Night Market, which I've seen on this list. What you have sent me as homework, Steve. And the only reason I know about it really is because I backed it on Kickstarter. So I am looking forward to it for obvious reasons. But it's because the reason I backed it is because it's by the same people who did Hanamakoji.
Oh yeah.
And we like Hanamakoji.
Love Hanamakoji.
Yeah, it's a very,
so
very clever
two-player game. Is it the same designers, or is it the same?
It's the same publishers.
Emperor 64. Yeah.
No, it's what the hell are they called? I think they've either changed their name or done something. It's by Tabletop Games Project. I can't remember, but it might be the same designers. TBD Games LLC apparently. But it's a 4-player game, and the idea is that you're bidding on market stalls in Taiwan, funnily enough. Essentially a bit like the, that massive food market in London, where you just sort of go under the arches, and there's tons and tons of street
Borough
food
Market.
stalls. That's the one, Borough Market. It's a bit like that, but in Taiwan. So the idea is you're bidding on food stalls, and ultimately you get money from having a really good location of your food stall, so the person with the most money at the end of the game. So you're sort of spending money to make money. Fairly straightforward, obviously reasonably lightweight. I haven't played it, but that's the idea. And because it's by the same people, I thought, why the hell not? Because it's only $40.
Yeah, I've seen some reviews of this on Instagram yesterday, actually. Board Game Jimmy was playing this the other day, I'm sure, and it did sound quite interesting. Well, I'll see your previous designer that you're interested in and raise you, Andy. I'm going to raise you Fit to Print by what's his name? I forget his name. It's the same guy that did Tiny Towns.
Yeah.
I really, really like Tiny Towns. I think it's a really good.
I think we all
gateway.
do. Didn't we name it as Game of the Year a few years ago?
I think it's a great gateway game. It's a really good fun game. And his Peter McPherson and his Fit to Print is his next game. It's got some wonderful looking art from Ian O'Toole as well, so it looks spectacular. I know it came to Kickstarter. A friend of mine backed this, so I'm looking forward to him bringing it into the Games Club to have a look at that. That hopefully is going to be in the next couple of months or so. But that's one I'd like to know more about, just because I think the designer did a great job. It's probably going to be it's another lightweight game, and that's fine if it's going to be good for those social interactions. But yeah, Fit to Print is another one I'm interested in.
So I've got a couple that have jumped out at me from this list, from the Gen Con list. Number one, Perseverance Castaway Chronicles episodes 3 and 4.
Yes, I was talking to Big Davey T about this at Aircon. I think it was Aircon, and he said at the time, at least, that they'd basically got episode 4 kind of down, but they were struggling with a few elements of episode 3. So presumably he's now ironed those creases out. But
yeah, I mean, I still haven't played episode 2 yet, so I really shouldn't be excited about 3 and 4 yet. But there we go. I enjoyed episode 1. There's a little bit. There's a thing here for the third version of Great Western Trail, which is the New Zealand one. Although I think somebody pointed out that whoever designed this has never actually seen New Zealand, because apparently the map looks nothing like the real place. Other one that's jumped out at me is a new game by Adam Krupinski.
Right.
Oh, we like him.
Got me interested
Nemesis
already.
And Dark Ages and other such games, which is Horror on the Orient Express,
Go on.
which some may know as a Call of Cthulhu campaign. And the best way to describe this looks like Arkham Horror on a train. And I know that's a derivative explanation, but that's enough for me.
There's actually a scenario in Mansions of Madness, which is what the 1215 or whatever the hell it is from Arkham, which is basically that on a train as well. I'm sure they're very, very different, but
I'm sure they are. But yes, that looks interesting.
I've also seen Coalitions, which obviously we've talked about at Expo.
Yeah, I really want to play that again.
That's obviously, yes, so do I. Rory and I really enjoyed that, but I hadn't actually realised there's a shitload of it. Just looking at the Kickstarter, and then Phalanx are obviously doing late pledges and sort of pre-orders on their website, and there's a lot of expansions on that.
Nice.
3 big box expansions, bunches of miniatures and metal coins and all that sort of jazz. So it's probably a good job I didn't back all of that, because I'd be eating beans now if that was if that was the case. But yeah, Rory and I really enjoyed Coalitions, and also Unhappy King Charles is, I think, going to be out for Essen as well. But that's only a 2-player. None of us. I've played a very quick game at the Expo of that. Really enjoyed it. It's a bit like Hannibal, but a bit smaller. But really enjoyed that too.
Now, one game I'm intrigued about, based on what we talked about in the last episode, is a game called Age of Innovation, which for all intents and purposes looks like Terra Mystica 2nd Edition.
Oh, okay. That looks interesting.
Now, I stumbled across this when we were recording the last episode talking about Terra Mystica, and it's going to be at Gen Con apparently. So it's a standalone game. Apparently, it says based in the Terra Mystica universe and looks very similar to Terra Mystica. So I don't actually know what the differences are. The impression I've got from looking through some of the guides and that to forum posts is it's like a streamlined, updated version.
Okay. Oh, yes. The new Vital Lacerda game, Inventions. I'm assuming that's going to be out for Essen, probably not Gen Con, because it was only sort of kickstarted a few months ago, and there's no way that's been printed yet. So I'm guessing that's going to be out for Essen. I don't know. But yes, I obviously like the look of that.
And I've got, because I'm also a bit of a fan of Fabio Lopiano games. So Sancori, which I got a very quick look at an empty box during the expo from Osprey Games, and Three Ring Circus, which looks very, very pretty, which is a co-design from De Vere. So I want to hear more about that because it looks pretty, and I think a circus theme. I want more games with a circus theme.
You could play Scout.
No.
That's got a really strong theme.
Very powerful.
Runs right through it, yeah.
Runs
deep.
Go play Scout. Okay, let's go on board game prices for Scout. Let's have a look.
Don't play Scout, mate. It's shite.
I remember. Don't worry, boys.
That still annoys Alora, actually. She's like, you only played it twice. Yes, but 4 of us all played it twice, and we all thought it was shit.
It's not our fault.
Not for us, mate. Just not for us.
Yeah, I mean, if she wants to find some other friends to play with it, then fair
Yep,
enough.
it's fine. It's just
Anything
not-
for you then, Sid? While you've had a few more minutes of doing your homework
No,
while we've been
I
chatting.
haven't really. To be honest with you, the one you've kind of touched on a couple of them. Great Western Trail, New Zealand, for example. Played the I think the original game, first edition with Andy once, and really enjoyed that. So nice new map and that kind of stuff would be quite exciting. But no, other than that, I think I'm struggling because all I'm looking at, if I'm not careful, is box art. And that's a bad trap to fall into sometimes. I'm basically going to make preconception judgments on box art that for the stuff I don't know. So
It's pretty much where I live.
Yeah.
I think, well, why do I buy this on Kickstarter? It's pretty.
I mean, there's a few other things. I mean, there's a few things in the RPG world coming out, but I think we've already spoken about most of them. Things like the new Fallout adventure and various things like that, which I think are going to be out in time for Gen Con, or definitely. So there's a few things going out in that world, but no, I don't think no.
I'm disappointed there's nothing about the new Shadowborn game. That doesn't look like it's going to be there.
That's been in development for quite a while now, hasn't it?
Yeah, so it's there's very little details about it. It's an area control game set in like medieval, Camelot era, which is bizarre because Shadowborn Games announced it at roughly the same time that Simon announced the Kickstarter for Mordred, which is a
Camelot themed
area control game.
Just finally, Mr. Mark Capel-Helm has asked, whatever happened to John? Well, we killed him and ate him, but because he's so diminutive, we had to have him with chips so it would go round.
Is that why you've added me? Because I'm a bit more chunky, so when it comes to my turn to be eaten, you won't be hungry.
Exactly right, yes. You'll be a much more filling meal.
But for anyone that's only been listening to Polyhedron Collider for the last 3 years, John used to be a host.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before I joined, it was back in the old days. It was Steve, Andy, and John, and then I joined, and then John got eaten.
Then we lowered our standards and let Sid in.
We won't talk about why I'm here.
You're a token Scot, aren't you?
That's one way of covering my diversity for sure.
Affirmative action, that's what this is.
Oh my God. John wants to come back on the podcast. I know that. But John has got 2 kids aged, 1 and 3 at the moment. So,
full hands, yeah.
I mean, he is playing RPGs, but I think that's all he's managing to get played at the moment.
He is. He's playing on a Wednesday night in my D&D Curse of Strahd session, which I shall cover in a future podcast, because you 3 aren't playing, you slags.
Unfortunately, you only got 4 slots.
I know, it's a shame, but I am greatly enjoying it. I hope the same is true for the players.
Right then, let's draw this to a close. this has been Polyhedron Collider. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed us, please give us a review on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. You can find us all over the internet on Facebook, on X, because it's no longer Twitter, it's now X.
What?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not joking. I'm not making shit up now. Anyway, we're on. Just look for Polyhedron Collider or look for Board Game Geek Guild 2726. And until next time, happy gaming.
Ta-ra.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.